Welcome to my channel, where the scariest stories come to life. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into the horror. At the time, I lived in the suburbs of Chicago. I had just gotten my heart broken not long before this and was trying to get back into the dating scene if I could. I was quite lonely, so I tried meeting someone online. I began talking to a man named Robbie. He was a bit younger than me, which wasn't something I really liked. I was in my late 20s, and he was exactly 20 years old, still living at home with his parents. He wasn't going to community college either. I would normally have dismissed him because of this, but he was very persistent about talking to me, and he seemed like an interesting person regardless. He liked horror just as much as I did, which at least got me interested in meeting him. He lived in Wisconsin, but in a very rural part of the county. I didn't have a GPS, and this was before smartphones, so I had quite a bit of trouble finding his place. Eventually, I was able to, though, and I picked him up. All I wanted to do was go have dinner and talk, get to know each other a little bit. We were getting along very well. He hadn't seen nearly as many movies as I had, and when I talked about them a lot, he asked if I wanted to go buy some and maybe go back to his house to watch them together. I was a bit hesitant because he lived with his parents. You've probably figured out by now that I'm a gay guy, which I guess I should have mentioned first. I felt really uncomfortable going back with his parents still there, especially when he told me they didn't even know he was gay. They weren't gay positive at all either. He told me he would tell them I was just a friend passing through who needed a place to sleep and couldn't afford a hotel. He listed off the many lies he would tell them. You know, this should have been like 1,000 red flags at once, give or take. I was extremely uncomfortable with all of this, but I was on the rebound, and Robbie seemed like a likable guy. Despite my apprehension, I decided, why not give it one try? We bought a couple of movies. I don't recall all of them other than the remake of House of Wax. I think I mostly only remembered that one because of the weird shit that happened while we were watching it. After shopping, we drove out to his house. As I mentioned before, he lived in a very rural part of the county. His house was very old and sat on what I assumed used to be a farm that was no longer tended to. The fact that his house was so isolated made me feel really weird. Things got even stranger when I met his parents. I could tell right away something was off about them, and they didn't seem to like me either. I don't remember much about the father, but the mother was very overbearing. I could tell right away that if they didn't know their son was gay, they at least suspected it very strongly, and they were very, very angry about it. While we were watching the movie, I was sitting in a recliner in the middle of the living room. We had the lights off, of course, since it was a horror movie. Although the parents had said they were going to bed, there were times when I could hear something shuffling and sneaking behind me. I would turn around only to see the mother peeking around the corner of the dark hallway, watching me. She would linger there for a moment before seeing that I had noticed her and sprinting around the corner. Her absences never lasted long, though. She would creep back through the darkness of the hallway and hide, continuing to watch me. Then there was one very scary moment. We were watching House of Wax, and I turned around to see her hiding in the doorway again. This time, she was holding a knife in her hand. She held the handle with one hand and was lightly slapping the flat part of the blade with her other. I knew for a fact she wasn't doing anything in the kitchen at the moment. It was even scarier, because she knew I kept looking back and catching her there. This was something she wanted me to see. I really should have left right then and there, but Robbie didn't seem to think anything was going on. For some reason, the idiot in me decided not to leave. Robbie told his mom we were going to go to sleep. He showed her he had made up a bed on the floor of his room for me to sleep on. Then he closed the door. He waited until she was gone before locking it. I laid down on the floor, not really knowing what was going on here. Robbie asked me to come up to the bed to cuddle with him. I liked him a lot, but I'm sure everyone listening to this story can realize how blind I must have been by this point. I guess I really liked him. I should have never gotten into this situation. Needless to say, I didn't sleep well. There were several times throughout the night when I could hear the doorknob being turned and scraped against. I knew that was dear old Mom checking to see if the door was locked. She was probably trying to open it to see if anything particularly gay was going on. This happened no less than 5 times. Each time it did, all I could think about was her standing there in the darkness with a knife in her hand. Somehow, I managed to survive the night. The way his mother had acted didn't seem to bother Robbie at all. He went through the entire experience as if nothing had ever happened. He was also completely oblivious to the fact that his mom knew he was gay and was willing to try and scare his date with a knife in order to keep him from being so. I left the house as soon as possible to avoid encountering Mom again. Not long after, I got a call from Robbie. His mom told him I wasn't allowed to come back, and he was really confused. Didn't matter much to me. I wouldn't have gone back there if he paid me. Strangely enough, not long after, Robbie decided he didn't really feel like being gay anymore. Last I knew of him, he was dating some girl in his church group. I really hope his mom didn't threaten him or something like that. The whole thing was way too weird and scary, and I was happy to never have to meet any of these people again. Like an idiot, though, a while later, I looked him up on Facebook, and to my surprise, I found him. Honestly, what I found was pretty disturbing. It seemed like he went through periods of acceptance, then suppressed it again. Eventually, he even started supporting conversion therapy and believing that being gay could be cured. Having one's true identity suppressed can be the scariest thing of all. This was clearly a kid who was severely brainwashed and didn't have the slightest clue what was going on. It was the only place in my home I could go where it was completely dark. Once, I even tried putting duct tape over my bedroom window to keep the light out, but that didn't work so well. On this particular night, I was sitting there in the closet, listening to some really good creepypasta, although I was having a pretty hard time getting into the right mood. I closed my computer lid and tried to listen to it that way. At least then it would be totally dark without the monitor on. That didn't really do very much for me, though. It kind of sucked, actually. I was hoping that the darkness would really get me into the ambience and get me scared. You know, that's what the dark is supposed to do. But it just wasn't happening tonight. At least I was having a good time listening to the stories themselves, as they were pretty good. I had been listening to this particularly long playlist and must have been in the closet for about 3 hours. I moved and stood up for a few moments to stretch my legs. It was about 2 in the morning. As I did so, as I leaned against the closet wall, the closet light turned on. The light switch was right outside the closet door on the left side of it, and I lived alone. That meant someone just flipped that switch. And not only had they just done that, they must be standing right outside the closet door. I froze, finally feeling that fear I had wanted so badly to feel. Now I was really regretting it, though. I had no idea what to do. I didn't have anything to protect myself with. It was just me and my trusty laptop in there. All I could do was stand there in complete fear, expecting any moment the door was going to burst open. When it did, I was sure I was going to die. I stood there and watched and listened, but no one opened that door. I waited for hours because I was too scared to check myself. When the sun finally rose, I got the nerve to open up the door myself. I looked around my room. It seemed there was no one there. Cautiously, I staked out the rest of my apartment for a hidden intruder. I didn't find anyone, but I did find my living room window wide open with the screen removed. My PS4 and my television were gone as well. So I guess I had been robbed. Someone had come into the house and must have known I was there in the closet. Did they scare me because they knew it would give them time to rob me, and I would be too freaked out to explore outside? Or did they think that light was for something else and left when they turned it on and discovered me there? I have no idea, but that was the freakiest experience of my life. Make sure your windows are always secured. It was really fun, and I often found some really interesting things out there too. One time, I stumbled upon this cave. Part of me really wanted to go and explore it, but I knew it wouldn't be a good idea by myself. I decided to save that for another time. When I went home, though, it really began to bother me. I regretted not exploring that cave. I felt like I was some sort of coward, and I really didn't want to feel that way. I wanted to go back and find out what was in there. About a month later, I went to stay with my aunt again. This time, I knew I was going to seek out that cave and explore it to its fullest. I brought a flashlight, a snack, and some water as well. I didn't really need much because I knew it would be a shallow cave and wouldn't take me very long at all. After about an hour of exploring the hills, I finally found that cave again. I guess I should explain the kind of cave it was. It was on the rocky side of a hill, and the entrance was quite short. I would have to get on my belly and push myself under it. Looking at it, I knew it would be an extremely tight fit. My curiosity was really strong, though, so I decided to go ahead and go for it. I got down on my belly and slowly began to crawl into that cave. I wasn't sure how deep it was or if it ever got any taller. What I was sure about was that it was very dark inside. The entrance was so small that not much light was able to get inside. Thank God, I decided to bring the flashlight with me. Right as I began crawling in further, though, I became aware of this really odd noise, a sort of rustling sound followed by a weird shrieking noise. It sent a real shiver down my spine. In a bit of panic, I moved my foot and got it wedged tight between the ceiling and wall. I groaned in pain and out of desperation for my stupidity. I tried to pull my foot out, but I wasn't able to move it because it was throbbing in agony. I cried out, and then I heard that rustling noise again. It was too dark to see anything, so I grabbed for my flashlight. The sound was probably just nothing, but of course, I would be scared until I knew that for sure. I moved my hand on the flashlight, switched it on, and pointed it toward the direction of that sound. I saw the worst possible thing, a cave full of the scariest looking bats I'd ever seen, only a couple of yards away from me. They were hanging from the ceiling, and all of them were staring at me. I screamed and did my best to pull myself free. My leg throbbed in agony as I moved. I don't know if it was the crying or the flashlight, but the bats got restless, and they started to fly right at me. Stupidly but instinctively, I swatted at them to defend myself. Two things happened in that moment. My leg finally pulled loose from the wall, and the bats began to bite me because I'd swatted at them. It felt like I was being jabbed with sharp, thin needles. I screamed again and tried to pull myself out of that cave. If you've ever seen the movie Terminator, my experience was very similar to Sarah Connor climbing through the machinery at the end. My leg was injured, and I was crawling through an area my body was wedged into. I was panicked and scared of the bats all around me, trying to bite me. I was scared I was going to get something real bad because I had just gotten bit. It took me a long time to crawl my way out. I was breathing heavily with fear, and I had never felt so claustrophobic before. By the time I did get out, I was hyperventilating. I tried to stand up on my foot, but my leg gave out. I had to crawl the rest of the way until I was able to get a broken branch on the ground I could use as a crutch. I was hurting real bad, and I was scared. I had probably just contracted rabies. I felt super sick. It took me nearly 3 hours to limp back to my aunt's house. In my gut, I just felt like I had rabies and was going to die. If I had been more educated about bats, I would have known that only 0.5% of them actually carry rabies. My feeling of being sick was probably psychosomatic, exacerbated by my fear and anxiety of hurting my foot. But I had to get a rabies shot anyway. It wasn't nearly as bad as people might tell you. It was still not pleasant by any means, though. Turns out, my ankle had been fractured, and I had to get a cast for it. Nowadays, I don't go into small caves or other tight spaces either. I'm completely claustrophobic, and although I'm more educated about bats now, I'm still scared shitless by them. Thanks for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give the video a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a terrifying tale. See you in the next one.